Well, thank you so much for coming out this evening to come and participate in this event that we have entitled, Does God Exist? Hear the evidence and decide for yourself. Tonight I hope to share with you a rigorous cumulative case for the existence of God, and I hope to present this case for God's existence using the latest scientific, mathematical and philosophical arguments available. In total, there are around 20 good philosophical arguments for the existence of God that are backed by mathematics and science. However, due to time constraints, we will be presenting what I believe to be the four most accessible arguments available to us. At the close of tonight's event, we will open the floor and try to answer as many questions as we can. So with that now being said, let's get started. On the 8th of April 1966, Time magazine printed a dramatic cover with just 3 words emblazoned in red upon a dark black background. The words read, "Is God dead?" Just a few short years after its Death of God issue, Time ran a similar cover story, only this time the question read, "Is God coming back to life?" During the 1970s, interest in philosophy of religion continued to grow, and in the 1980s, Time itself found running another cover story entitled Modernizing the Case for God. Time marveled, in a quiet revolution in thought and argument that hardly anybody could have foreseen only 2 decades ago, God is making a comeback. Most intriguingly, this is happening not among theologians or ordinary believers, but in the crisp intellectual circles of academic philosophers. So what were the philosophical thoughts and arguments under discussion? Well, we'll come to those in just a moment, but first I believe it's necessary for us to understand why it is important that God does exist. And I can think of at least 3 good reasons why it is important for God to exist. The first reason is that without God, life would be ultimately and objectively meaningless. Now, we may be able to derive some meaning and purpose for our lives from our family, career, or hobbies, but this meaning will be short-lived. And our lives will serve no meaning at all once we die. In fact, in the end, with the final heat death of the universe, all life will cease to exist, and all derived meanings of purpose will be extinguished along with the universe itself. The second reason is that without God, we must live in a world devoid of all hope. No hope of eternal life. No hope of future justice. No hope of evil being vanquished. And in a world without hope, all that's left to us is despair and hopelessness. The third reason is that if God does exist, then we can have the thrill of knowing him and having the real hope of everlasting life. If God does exist, then there is real purpose for our lives. We would be, after all, his very special creation. And our lives would and do have ultimate and objective meaning. If God does exist, then we can have the real hope that one day evil will be vanquished and justice will be done. We can then look forward to a time when goodness, love, and joy will reign. And although these are not arguments for the existence of God, they are 3 compelling reasons why it is important for God to exist. Now, with this being said, let's now begin with our first philosophical argument this evening, and this is called the Kalam cosmological argument. The Kalam cosmological argument is formulated like this. Premise 1. Everything that comes into existence has an efficient cause. Premise 2. The universe came into existence. The conclusion, therefore the universe has an efficient cause. Now let's take a look at these premises to see if the conclusion is valid and sound. Premise 1. Everything that comes into existence has an efficient cause. The principle of cause and effect is a metaphysical principle. It applies to the physical and non-physical world, including the world of mathematics and mind. We have never in the history of the universe experienced an effect preceding its cause. So premise number 1 is logically sound, and therefore it is valid. Premise 2, the universe came into existence. According to recent scientific discovery, the universe came into existence roughly 13.8 billion years ago. Prior to this, the universe of space, time, and matter simply did not exist. As physicists John Barrow and Frank Tipler confirm, at this singularity, space and time came into existence. Literally nothing existed before the singularity. So if the universe originated at such a singularity, we would truly have a creation ex nihilo. Professor Stephen Hawking and Roger Penrose also concur. Almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. Professor of Physics Alexander Vilenkin underscores the power of this discovery when he writes, "It is said that an argument is what convinces reasonable men, and a proof is what it takes to convince even an unreasonable man. With the proof now in place, cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning." As premise 1 and premise 2 hold true, they are both logically sound and valid, therefore the conclusion naturally follows. Therefore, the universe has an efficient cause. But what could the transcendent cause of the universe be? For the cause of the universe could not be the universe itself. For then the universe would have to pre-exist itself to create itself, and this is logically absurd. The three possible transcendent causes of the universe are nothing, something temporal, or something eternal. Let's now take a look at these three possible causes. Let's look at number 1, nothing as the cause of the universe. By nothing, we mean no thing, and the definition of nothing is the absence of everything and anything, including all potential and possibility. And without potential and possibility, nothing at all could arise. I mean, if things could just pop into existence, literally from nothing, then it is inexplainable why everything and anything doesn't just pop into existence from nothing. Who here and there has a real concern that an elephant has just materialized in their front room and is currently defiling your carpet? This is, of course, an absurd notion and can be ruled out quite quickly. So the option of nothing creating the universe is an absurd notion, and we can forget about that. Option number 2 is that something temporal created the universe. When we consider a temporal cause of the universe, or a cause within time, we run into the logical problem as to what caused the temporal cause. Things that exist in time have pasts, presents, and futures, beginnings and endings. So what could be the cause of this temporal cause of the universe? This chicken and egg scenario cannot be stretched back into infinity, as this would lead to an actually infinite number of events leading up to today, which is logically impossible. And we can illustrate this quite simply. Imagine after tonight's meeting I was uncharacteristically generous and I decided to buy each one of you a drink. We all popped down to the local pub and we're all stood around the bar, and I ask every single one of you, what would you like? And you all shout back. One shouts back a Guinness, another a wine, another a pint of Coke. But then we just stand there, waiting. 15 minutes go by and they're awkward until one of you pipes up and says, "Paul, are you actually going to buy us the drink?" To which I respond, "I will buy you the drink only after an infinite amount of time has passed." Will you ever receive the drink from me? Why? Because we're finite and you cannot receive anything after an infinite amount of time, correct? Could you receive a drink from me tonight if I was generous enough to buy you one? You could, which proves that prior to this evening, an infinite amount of time has not passed, which means that time itself had a beginning. And therefore, option number 2 can be ruled out. The third and final option is that something eternal caused the universe. And this third option, although difficult to comprehend, is logically possible. A cause that exists timelessly that brought our universe of space, time, and matter into being. And from this foundation, we can ascertain some of the attributes of this eternal cause. Number 1, this eternal cause must transcend the universe, for it could not exist within the universe prior to the universe being created. Number 2, as the cause of space cannot be space, then logically the cause is spaceless. Number 3, as the cause of time cannot be time itself, then logically the cause of time is timeless. Number 4, as the cause of matter cannot be matter itself, the cause of matter must be immaterial. Number 5, it must also be immensely powerful to create the universe in the first place and to generate all of its energy. Number 6, I also argue that the cause must be personal. For an eternal object or an eternal law could not choose to create anything. It would just remain as it has always existed. Only personal agency can choose to make a change. And with the creation of the universe, change occurred. So in summation, we are looking at a cause that is transcendent, spaceless, timeless, immaterial, immensely powerful, and a free will agent. And this description applies to only one known possible entity, and that entity is God. Now let's take a look at our second argument this evening, and this is called the argument from fine-tuning. Scientists once thought that whatever the initial conditions of the universe might have been, given enough time and a little luck, eventually intelligent life forms like ourselves would evolve. Instead, during the past 60 years or so, scientists had discovered, to their surprise, that the existence of intelligent life in the universe depends upon a complex and delicate balance of initial conditions given in the Big Bang itself. In fact, it appears that the universe has been incredibly fine-tuned for the existence of intelligent life from the very moment of its inception. And this fine-tuning is beyond comprehension in its delicacy. Astrophysicist Dr. Hugh Ross states that cosmologists have discovered more than 850 examples of fine-tuning in our universe to make advanced life possible. And this number of finely tuned examples is growing all the time. As to the delicacy of the fine-tuning, let me give you a couple of examples of the numbers to give you a feel for the odds. The number of seconds in the entire history of the universe, all the way back to the Big Bang, is 10 to the 18th power. That's 10 followed by 18 zeros. The number of subatomic particles in the universe is 10 to the 80th power, and that's 10 followed by 80 zeros. Now, in order for the universe to be life-permitting, the force of gravity and the weak force in the atom have to be finely tuned to the precision of 1 part in 10 to the 100th power. The cosmological constant that governs the accelerating expansion in the universe is finely tuned to 1 part in 10 to the 120th power. An example that's even more breathtaking is given by Professor Roger Penrose at Oxford University, when he states that the odds of the initial low entropy state of the universe, obtained by chance alone, is 1 part in 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 123. A number that's so incomprehensible that to call it astronomical would be a wild understatement. Professor Steven Weinberg, a Nobel laureate in high-energy physics, notes, "How surprising it is that the laws of nature and the initial conditions of the universe should allow for the existence of beings who could observe it. Life as we know it would be impossible if any one of these several physical quantities had slightly different values." And the examples of fine-tuning are so diverse and so numerous, they are unlikely to disappear with any future advance within physics. Fine-tuning is here to stay and requires some sort of explanation for its existence. In the literature upon this topic, there are 3 possible explanations for the fine-tuning of the universe. Number 1, physical necessity. The universe needs to be this way. Option number 2, chance. We just got really, really, really lucky. Option number 3, design. The universe was created and purposed this way. So let's take a look at these 3 explanations in order. Number 1, physical necessity. Does the universe need to be this way? Well, the answer is a resounding no. Life-prohibiting universes are exceedingly more likely than life-promoting universes. In addition to this, there doesn't seem to be any good reason for the universe having to exist in the first place. And so we are well within our rights to ask the question, why is there something rather than nothing? And why is the universe so delicately tuned for advanced life? Physical necessity, therefore, does not appear to be a very convincing answer. The second option we have is chance. When we talk about chance, we're talking about statistical probability. And so we want to ask a very simple question. What is the statistical probability that nothing could create a universe? Well, the answer we would all agree upon, hopefully, is 0. There is 0 probability that nothing could create a universe. For nothing lacks all potential and all possibility. Now, when we ask the question, not just in reference to any universe, but to our universe with its 850 finely tuned cosmological features, the probability is still 0. However, let's be generous to the atheist. And let's say that somehow the universe did just pop into existence from nowhere. What would be the chance of a universe popping into existence with just the right levels of fine-tuning for life to be possible? Well, the chance probability of this occurring would be considered absolutely astronomical. To illustrate the absurdity of this, try to imagine right now all the grains of sand in the world today. That's roughly 7.5 times 10 to the power of 18 grains. Now take just one grain of sand, and with a Sharpie, colour that grain of sand red and throw it back into the beaches of the world and mix them all up. Next, blindfold a person and tell them on their first try they must pick out that single red grain of sand or be shot. And doing it once is not enough. They have to repeat this experiment over and over and over again in order to stay alive. That's the type of statistical probability we're talking about with the fine-tuning in the universe, which makes your life and my life possible. Chance, therefore, does not seem to be a plausible explanation for the fine-tuning of the universe for advanced life. So we have a final option, design. And the universe clearly looks as though it has been purposed for advanced life. And this purposing is not due to physical necessity, nor is it due to chance. Therefore, the most reasonable explanation is design. And design requires a designer, a transcendent designer, a fine-tuner of the universe. As agnostic astrophysicist Dr. Paul Davies comments, the really amazing thing is not that life on Earth is balanced on a knife edge, but that the entire universe is balanced on a knife edge and would be total chaos if any of the natural constants were off, even slightly. You see, even if you dismiss man as a chance happening, the fact remains that the universe seems unreasonably suited to the existence of life, almost contrived, you might say, a put-up job. Astrophysicist Sir Fred Hoyle agrees when he says, "A common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super-intellect has monkeyed with physics, as well as with chemistry and biology, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question." Cosmologist Ed Harrison speaks of the power of the fine-tuning when he states, "Here is the cosmological proof of the existence of God." Notice what he said there. This is the cosmological proof of the existence of God. The design argument of Paley, updated and refurbished. The fine-tuning of the universe provides prima facie evidence of deistic design. Take your choice, blind chance that requires multitudes of universes, or design that requires only one. Many scientists when they admit their views incline toward the teleological or design argument. The third argument this evening is the argument from objective moral values. The moral argument for the existence of God refers to the claim that God is needed to provide a coherent ontological foundation for the existence of objective moral values and duties. The argument can be summarized in the following way. Premise 1. If God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties do not exist. Premise 2. Objective moral values and duties do exist. Conclusion. Therefore, God exists. Let's now take a look at these two premises to see if the conclusion naturally follows. Premise 1. If God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties do not exist. But by objective morality, we mean a moral law that exists beyond our own subjective opinion. However, if such a moral law should exist, then it must be grounded in something, or rather someone, who is an objective moral lawgiver, an ultimate authority that governs the affairs of the human race, an ultimate moral authority that we are ultimately answerable to. And this objective standard is what we would call God. Therefore, if God does not exist, then it is clear that objective morality does not exist, for there would be nothing to ground it in. So premise 1 holds true. Premise 2, objective morality, objective moral values and duties do exist. Human beings instinctively know that there are certain behaviours that are truly right and truly wrong. Some examples that we could give would be the Holocaust was morally wrong, irrespective of Hitler and the Nazis and what they believed about it. And it would have still remained morally wrong even if the Nazis had won World War II. Another example would be torturing and raping a child for fun. This would remain morally wrong even if violent paedophiles should gain an upper hand in our legal system. Who would argue that these are not objectively wrong? Or that feeding the hungry, clothing the cold, or looking after orphans is the morally right thing to do? Even atheist philosopher Louise Antony agrees. Any argument against the objective reality of moral values will be based on premises that are less obvious than the existence of objective moral values themselves. The conclusion then stands, therefore God exists. This is the natural outworking of the two premises being valid and true. Any attempt to get rid of God from this equation would ultimately reduce all morality to subjective morality, i.e., whatever works for me. Some may want to argue that these moral laws are the natural outworking of Darwinian evolution for the promotion of longevity of our species. And under theistic evolution, this wouldn't necessarily be a problem. However, under materialistic evolution, one would have to ask the question as to why a cold, mindless, undirected, and indifferent universe would even care about the promotion and longevity of our species. Okay, now we come to our fourth and final argument this evening, the argument from the resurrection of Jesus Christ. The physical resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth from the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea in Jerusalem stands as the greatest miracle of Christianity, and if true, the greatest historical event since the creation of the universe ex nihilo. By resurrection, the Christian does not mean resuscitation, for many people have been resuscitated whilst undergoing the death process. Resurrection is the coming back to life again of a fully dead corpse. And in Jesus' case, the resurrection marks the beginning of a new order of life and creation that will span on into eternity. Of course, for Jesus to have been resurrected would first require him to have actually lived, started a religio-political movement that would have upset the Jewish and Roman authorities to the point where they would have deemed it necessary to kill him by crucifixion. Today, no serious historian denies the life, death, and burial of Jesus of Nazareth, as can be seen from the following quotes. Gerd Ludman states, Jesus' death as a consequence of crucifixion is indisputable. John Dominic Crossan agrees, there is not the slightest doubt about the fact of Jesus' crucifixion under Pontius Pilate. Paula Fredrickson adds, the single most solid fact about Jesus' life is his death. He was executed by the Roman prefect Pilate on or around Passover in the manner Rome reserved particularly for political insurrectionists, namely crucifixion. And even the skeptical New Testament historian Bar Ehrman confirms, one of the most certain facts of history is that Jesus was crucified on orders of Roman prefect of Judea, Pontius Pilate. Belief in the resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth was the instant impetus for the birth and development of the church in Jerusalem. And we have in our possession today a developed creed regarding this resurrection that can be dated to within 3 years of Jesus' resurrection. And the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 15 relates it as follows. For what I received, I passed on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, and then to the 12. After that he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters at the same time, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles, and last of all he appeared to me also, as to one abnormally born. Robert Funk, the founder of the Jesus Seminar, confirms this information. The conviction that Jesus had risen from the dead had already taken root by the time Paul was converted in around the year 33 Common Era. On the assumption that Jesus died about 30 Common Era, the time for development was thus 2 or 3 years at the very most. Michael Golder, who is an atheist New Testament professor at the Birmingham University, agrees. This creed goes back at least to what Paul was taught when he was converted, a couple of years after the crucifixion. Eminent Oxford scholar N.T. Wright elaborates, this is the kind of foundation story with which a community is not at liberty to tamper. It was probably formulated within the first 2 or 3 years after Easter itself, since it was already in formulaic form when Paul received it. So some questions need to be asked. What accounts for the empty tomb of Jesus in Jerusalem? What accounts for the sudden rise of the church in Jerusalem? What accounts for the many and varied resurrection appearances of Jesus to his disciples, both men and women, over a period of 40 days? What accounts for the sudden conversion of Christianity's foremost enemy, Saul of Tarsus? What accounts for the willing martyrdoms of Jesus' earliest disciples and apostles? First of all, let's tackle what happened to the body of Jesus of Nazareth. We have 4 live options regarding this question. Option number 1, Jesus' body remained in the Jerusalem tomb. Now, Christianity is based on the resurrection of Jesus from the tomb. The church in Jerusalem wouldn't have gotten past day 1 if the tomb was still sealed and occupied with the body of Jesus. The enemies of the new church movement could have easily revealed the body of Jesus if it was still lying there, thus ending Christianity once and for all. This, however, never happened. Option number 2. The body of Jesus was stolen by his disciples. There's a couple of problems with this. Number 1, Jewish people in the first century simply did not believe in the resurrection of the dead before the final day of judgment. Therefore, stealing Jesus' body and proclaiming a current resurrection went against the beliefs and expectations of the day. Number 2, the fear-filled disciples would have had to approach, take on and defeat a Roman guard, remove a massive stone, steal the body, and then suffer imprisonment and martyrdom for a lie they had fabricated. Option number 3, Rome removed the body of Jesus. A couple of problems with this. Number 1, what good reason would Rome have for removing the body of Jesus? They would certainly not want Jesus to be deified after going to such extreme lengths to rid the earth of him. Secondly, as Christianity and the proclamation of Jesus as king opposed the rule of Caesar, Rome would have quickly produced the dead body of Jesus to show a defeated and unresurrected Messiah. This, however, never happened. Option number 4, God resurrected Jesus of Nazareth from the dead. According to the many independent eyewitness testimonies available to us today, this is exactly what happened. This event is in keeping with what the Old Testament prophets foretold would happen and what Jesus himself said would occur only 3 days after his death. So now let's take a look at the resurrection appearances of Jesus. And again, we have 4 live options regarding this event. Option number 1, the disciples just made it up. Again, why would the disciples just make up resurrection appearances? This would need to be a massive lie, held by more than 500 people, none of which could break under the pressure of scrutiny. And to what end? Suffering, imprisonment, persecution, martyrdom, all for their lie? Option number 2, Jesus didn't really die. We have 3 problems here. Number 1, Rome was very good at killing people. And this is why the centurion pushed a spear through Jesus' heart to make sure he was really dead. Number 2, Jesus would have still needed to have escaped his tightly bound burial cloths and released himself from a stone-covered tomb, upon which taking on an armed Roman guard and fleeing to safety. Number 3, Jesus would have then needed to have acted like a glorified Saviour to convince his disciples that he really was resurrected. This would be hard to do with the wounds on his body and face, the nail holes in his hands and feet, as well as the spear hole through his heart. Option number 3, the disciples hallucinated it. From time to time, people do hallucinate deceased loved ones. However, this is rather rare and usually occurs on an individual basis. What we are dealing with within the Gospels and the epistle accounts is something of a far greater magnitude than a few localized individual hallucinations, but rather groups of varying individuals on varying occasions in various locations claiming to see, communicate with, and touch the risen Jesus of Nazareth. One of the groups mentioned by the Apostle Paul numbered more than 500 individuals at the same time who saw him after he had died. Option number 4. The disciples really did encounter the resurrected Jesus of Nazareth. And this is in keeping with the eyewitness testimony that we have available to us today. According to this testimony, Jesus was able to talk, walk, and even eat with his disciples 3 days after his own death. The evidence for Jesus' death, burial, and physical resurrection is so convincing that even atheists are forced to concede this point. As Jeff Lauder, atheist and co-founder of infidels.org, admits, I remember thinking to myself that if I took the time to investigate the resurrection, I could make anyone who believed it look like a fool. Or so I thought. I was about to discard it as another illogical religious belief, yet I found it extremely difficult to deal with as a critic. Also, renowned Oxford professor and promoter of atheism, Anthony Flew, states, the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus is better than for any claimed miracles in any other religion. It's outstandingly different in quality and quantity.